And I think, are we ready to go? I think we're ready to go. All right, so I will share my screen again and we'll kick her off. All right, so tonight, like I said, I'm Jessica Vavris, and I have the privilege of working with our network partnership between the ESD network and OSPI. And myself and my colleague, John Mishra from OSPI, will be doing a welcome overview of like, what is this Balanced Calendar Initiative? And then we'll hand it over to our esteemed colleague and partner, David Hornak from the National Association for Year-Round Education from Michigan to basically be the crux of our night together. And he's brought a wonderful panel of family members and educators to reflect on their journey through their work around balanced calendars. And then we'll get you out by 7 o'clock, ready for your evening dinner or hot tea. So with that, I would welcome John.
All right. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, everybody, for attending this evening. As Jessica said, my name is John Mishra. I'm the Executive Director of Special Programs and Federal Accountability, and I am OSPI's Modified Balanced Calendar Contact. And I am joining you from the traditional lands of the Coastal Salish tribes. So let's go to the next slide, and we'll talk about the Balanced Calendar. You'll see how the folks are engaged in this work to support student learning and how it's aligned with one of Superintendent Chris Rakedall's priorities. And as on the slide, you can see, our priority is to substantially shrink summer learning loss in the long term and learning loss due to the pandemic in the short term by balancing the school calendar. So this statement is tied to the pandemic, but this, as our folks from Michigan will say, it is also effective in non-pandemic times. And so the pandemic part of this comes up because we had some COVID relief funds that came to the state. And to support this work to date, OSPI has allocated over $2 million to support the balanced calendar work, with plans to continue the support through the next school year. And we know for sure that this will be money well spent. If we move to the next slide, it has a list of all of the organizations that are supporting the grantees. This isn't work that's done alone or in isolation. There are valuable partners involved. So thank you for the National Association for Year-Round Education, Association of Education Service Districts, Association of Washington School Principals, Washington State School Directors Association, Washington Education Association, and Washington Association of School Administrators for ongoing support. And the next slide then will show all of the LEAs, yes, receiving the grant, and the support ESDs. We have we have 3 ESDs that are supporting the work statewide, and they're, as you see, they're assigned by region because we have 9 separate ESDs. To date, we have 21 grantees for the pilot grant. We have funding available up to 40. And I want to point this out. The planning grant applications are open through December. And for those folks that are familiar with the iGrant system, it is form package number 173. And we'll have more information for you with a web link here at the end. So that's it from my end. Again, thank you for attending, and I'm going to turn it over to David for the main part of the presentation today. David, it's all yours.
Thank you, John. I am going to share my screen now, and we are going to get rolling. Good afternoon or evening, depending on where you are currently located. We are thrilled to have this opportunity to visit with you tonight or this afternoon. While these are extremely challenging times, I'd like to thank you all for your ongoing support of education. We are not able to do this without you, and you are critical to the mission of educating children across the nation, especially in Washington State. Together we are better, and it is my hope for the world that we all enter each situation with empathy and care, with the desire and drive to understand one another by seeking clarity more often. I also appreciate your collective interest in the balanced school calendar. And while the readiness and steps moving forward are unique to each district and the context that you're living in, the pace will also vary on this journey. You need to be aware that we are here for you. And what I've been involved in over the last year in Washington State has been quite impressive. And while we sit roughly 2,222 miles apart, the goal continues to be about learning together and from one another. I have assembled an amazing panel of parents and guardians this evening, and the plan is to share some information with you for approximately 20 to 25 minutes, and then introduce our panelists and allow you to ask questions accordingly. So as we move through, there may be a time in the future where you might want to reach out and connect with me. Here is my contact information. And while it might be difficult for you to tell over Zoom, I am 6'4". I imagine I have the largest ears that you have ever seen. And I'm a former kindergarten teacher. And those things all played well together while I was in the classroom teaching. First of all, I would tell my students that I can hear everything. And then as a behavior modification, my classroom was nice and quiet. I also have very large feet. And I said to the boys and girls, keep your legs tucked in, because if I trip on you, I'm going to hurt you, but I'm going to probably hurt myself even more. Again, nice and tidy in my classroom. But here's the reality. In October annually, I would start getting tired. Now I want to set some more context for you. I was teaching a morning session of kindergarten and an afternoon session of kindergarten. So 2 sessions of kindergartners. But the reality was, in my 12 or 13 year teaching career, in October, that pattern continued annually. I would start the school year with endless energy, and by October I would be tired and I would limp to the finish line. And again, that would happen year after year after year. I'd also like to point out that the traditional school calendar is the most inequitable thing we find in education. As when we're not in school, kids do not have access to some of the basics, such as food, shelter, love, care, and of course, education. And you will learn from the video that I'm going to play next that the gap between students based on opportunity continues to grow. It gets wider and wider. This is especially true in a pandemic, and the fatigue that the traditional calendar teachers and students are feeling is similar to what they typically feel and what I felt in October, and what many feel from this point moving forward annually. So I'm going to pull over a video here, and we are going to watch this real fast.
Let's look at 2 children, one from a middle-income family, the other from one of the millions of low-income American families. As the 2 kids head off to kindergarten, look what happens. The middle-income child starts out with a 6-month lead. The low-income child is already falling behind because of a lack of access to early reading and preschool education. During their year in kindergarten, in the same school and classroom, the 2 children will learn at about the same rate, so we'll move them both forward 9 months. But look what happens in that first summer between kindergarten and 1st grade. Our middle-income child moves ahead about a month in reading because learning of one kind or another continues over the summer. The low-income child falls back about 2 months. So when school begins again, when they go back for 1st grade, the gap between them has already widened. During 1st grade, again, they move ahead at about the same rate, another 9 months. That next summer, the activities and lifestyle of the middle-income family keep that child moving forward, but the low-income child has fewer opportunities to reinforce good habits like reading, and that child falls farther behind. Then we come to 2nd grade, and again, our 2 children learn at the same rate. But the summer after 2nd grade sets our low-income child back again, and our middle-income child moves forward again, and the gap widens again. By just the 3rd grade, the 2 children are already far apart. By the end of 5th grade, the gap between the children is 2.5 to 3 years. It will keep growing through middle school. So you see, without addressing what's happening during the summer, it is impossible to ever catch up. It's impossible to close the gap. No matter how much high-quality learning goes on from September to June, every year the gap widens.
So that's a nice segue into what we're here to talk about. Our educators across the nation on the traditional school calendar are being asked to remediate the learning gaps that the traditional calendar creates. At the National Association for Year-Round Education, we're not advocating for additional school days. However, your district may say that you might want to try that. And that's the beauty of these grants that have been provided you or you have access to, certainly allow a lot of flexibility and freedom. And as John and I were talking on the phone today, I think that that's what sets Washington State apart. These funding sources are there for you to be creative, to think broadly, to consider all options. So here's a little context. Some of the students that we educate across the nation need 150 school days. That's all they need, but we give them 180. There are others that need that 180, and guess what? That's how our system is set up, for 180 school days. And what we're learning now is there are many kids in our system, especially in a pandemic, that need 220 or more school days, but we only give them 180. So again, the National Association for Year-Round Education is not advocating you add school days unless you choose to do so. What we are saying is it's time to balance your academic calendar across your calendar year and using your time more wisely. So what is the balanced school calendar? As I mentioned, it's typically using those 180 school days more efficiently to keep the learning process more continuous. Students have periodic shorter breaks rather than one long summer intermission. The most researched model includes what is called the 45-15. That's roughly 9 weeks of academics with 3 weeks off. Okay, and there are other options. There's a 60-15. There's a 60-10. There's what we have, and you'll see that shortly, which doesn't fit an academic researched model, but it works really well for our context. And balanced school districts have, as I said, several short vacations throughout the year rather than one 3-month long vacation. So there's the why. What is the why? What's the research behind this? The amount of knowledge lost during the summer break by children continues to grow. We saw that in the video. The extent of learning loss becomes more dramatic as students get older. We saw that in the video, but again, it's supported by research. John Hattie studies studies. Okay, so he does not study the balanced calendar per se. He's not a balanced calendar or summer school researcher, but he studies studies. And he has studied all kinds of educational interventions and determined that summer has a negative effect size of negative 0.9. That means all kids will regress in the summer. Now, John Hattie also, and his research team also went out to say that, you know, when you find an intervention that's at 0, that's still not necessarily where you want to put your money or you want to invest. You want to invest in techniques that have a 0.4 or better effect size, which will yield the greatest impact. Smith in 2012 indicated that 2/3 of the achievement gap in 9th grade, so all of those years prior to 9th grade, have a compounding effect on our kids. Kids entering high school are about a year to a year and a half behind their counterparts. All children attending school on the traditional calendar lose an average of 2.6 months of math skills during the summer. It's too early to tell what COVID is doing, but I can tell you there's a lot of unfinished learning occurring across the nation. And we are being asked to remediate the learning gaps the traditional calendar creates. To give this some context, some perspective, the state of New York spends $2.3 billion with a B dollars each year to remediate learning gaps created by summer intermission. It's been estimated that across the nation, we spend $21 billion remediating the gaps, again, that our calendar in fact contributes to. It's time to consider another option. So the balanced calendar again, it's easier to plan in learning chunks. We have reflective practitioners. Rested teachers result in improved attitudes. More frequent breaks results in less teacher burnout. And our teachers on the balanced calendar across the United States tend to take their annual appointments. Again, those are those dental appointments, doctor's appointments, checkups, what have you, during a school break, because it's really difficult to plan for a substitute now. And oh yeah, finding a substitute is also challenging. I'd like to highlight on this slide that this is the traditional calendar. Long summer intermission, long learning chunks, a few short breaks. As you can see, this one down here looks more balanced. What the balanced calendar employees are saying is also backed by research. Teachers in balanced programs generally believe that the quality of instruction is better due to the continuity of instruction. Their ability to look back at where they've been and look forward to where they're going ends up resulting in a better pace. They're better able to navigate the curriculum. Again, our educators on the balanced calendar believe that it's more efficient and more productive to plan curriculum in shorter blocks. There's an enhanced climate of professionalism because just when you need a break is there. Research clearly indicates that most teachers on the balanced calendar favor the alternative calendar because it enhances that professionalism and it improves teacher morale, motivation, and minimizes burnout and stress. And it's been reported that our educators are absent less on the balanced calendar, and our data would also support that. So there are many benefits that we've already discussed, but another benefit of the balanced calendar is something called intercession. And intercession allows us to do real-time remediation or enrichment during a school break. And you may be thinking, what in the world? You just promoted all of those breaks. Absolutely, they're there for you. But we also, our traditional model is to remediate and enrich in the summer. And I want you to think about what that really means. If someone is starting to struggle in October or September or November, somewhere this time of year, and we say, you know what, we're gonna tidy you up. We're gonna take care of everything in the summer. They're gonna go on for the next 6 to 7 months and struggle and fail and lose their will to continue to power through. So intercession provides an opportunity for teachers to experiment with different curriculum and grade levels. It allows for real-time remediation and enrichment, as well as advanced learning opportunities. We also have learned that teachers need to review less on the balanced calendar. It has been written in a lot of the research that our traditional calendar teachers are reteaching between 20 to 40 school days annually. And if you take the 180 school year and you back out 40 of those days, now they truly only have 140 days to make a year's worth of academic growth. Now, you're going to hear a little bit more about this benefit to our low socioeconomic status students. However, the newest research indicates the balanced calendar benefits all students, and I would make a case, all stakeholders. This is also true for teachers who teach advanced placement and honors courses because they prefer more lead time working with their students before the mandatory testing periods. So while I'm a strong advocate for the balanced school calendar, and the panel that I'm bringing to you tonight also has great experience on this journey, there is a theoretical framework that's worth promoting. It's called the Faucet Theory, and it really wasn't determined or invented per se very long ago. In 1997, Entwistle, Alexander, and Olson determined what is called the Faucet Theory. And as illustrated here, I would like you to rename your cold faucet, lower income, and your your hot faucet, middle and upper class. And as you saw in the video, that when on intermission, the middle and upper class child maintains some levels of academics, while the lower class tends to lose a great deal of knowledge. In other words, when our students are in school, they're all learning at the same rate, but the resources get turned off in the summer at different levels. The balanced school calendar impacts behaviors and health. Focused and engaged children tend to behave better. Less required time teaching, reteaching, I should say, allows us to reteach some behavior expectations and dig right into the current year curriculum. Again, we often do a brief behavior expectation review following each break, but it's no more than a 15, 20, 30, 45-minute review. And then we're into that year's curriculum. That's even on day 1 or day 2 of the school year. We're not doing the 20 to 40 days of reteaching. Balanced calendar schools tend to have better attendance because they're often deep cleaned more frequently. That means when we have a week break or a 2-week break, the carpets are being cleaned, all of the touch points are being sanitized again and again and again. Therefore, attendance is better on the balanced school calendar. So here is an example. Earlier, I talked about the 45-15, 9 weeks on, 3 weeks off. But our model doesn't marry well with that research. We tend to start in early August on the balanced calendar, take some time off right in here. Oops, I need to do this over here. Take some time off so that we can have our entire district in professional development together. Everyone is off for Labor Day weekend. Fall break, there is a common week and a second week off for the balanced calendar. Now the balanced calendar will be off the entire week next week, while the rest of the district will be off Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Here's an example of a common break. We're all off for MLK Junior Day. There's an extra day off plus a week here where the balanced calendar and our traditional hybrid calendar marry well together. For spring break, we have a common week off, and then the balanced calendar has a second week off. We are all off on Memorial, but the balanced calendar is off the rest of that week, and they end late June. Now, what is considered best practice? If you want to be considered a bona fide year-round calendar or a balanced calendar, you're truly only out 6 weeks. We're stretching that to potentially 8 weeks, but 6 is the gold standard. But as I mentioned, the beauty of these grants happen to be that you can create a real flexible, creative model and submit that to your school boards for consideration. We're getting to the end here, folks. There are many common concerns, and I would like to bring some of these to life. The balanced calendar school requires more school days. Nope, that's not true. You can add more days, but that's not one of our pillars. One of our pillars is truly taking the 180 days and using those days more efficiently across the calendar year. This cannot be done because of high school athletics. That's not true either. There's many districts across the nation that have been functioning on the balanced calendar for their entire existence. The balanced school calendar has ties back to the 1600s, and it was in the 1890s when the traditional 180 school day calendar was really born. And it was born for 3 reasons. 1, so our kids could help on the farm or in their community. 2, to provide time to teach immigrant children the English language. And 3, it doesn't hit the research very often, but it has been cited. Doctors at the time thought too much school is bad for your brain. So now we're trying to say we want kids more often, we want access to them. But the reality is, over 100 years ago, there was a different story. Summer employment for staff. I've heard this. You can't go to a balanced calendar. How do I work in the summer? Well, someone could teach intercession and make a per diem rate or some type of additional wage by teaching intercession. Summer employments for students. By connecting with your community leaders and your business force, it's very likely you can co-construct a calendar that allows the students to still participate in the job and workforce, thus, making this all work quite seamlessly. How do we clean our buildings if we don't have 12 to 13 weeks in the summer? Well, you do as much as you can in the summer, and then you get on a great cycle throughout the rest of the year during a school break. The balanced calendar eliminates summer altogether. No, not true. It can be as short as 6 weeks. It could be even shorter than that, or it can be long as about 8 weeks. Again, we don't advise you go much longer, but you might need to take steps towards a 6-week summer or an 8-week summer by going from a 12 or 13-week summer to a 10 to an 8 to a 6 per se. I've been told it costs more. It's really depending on how efficient your district is. We have balanced calendar schools and we have traditional calendar schools. And you may be thinking, why, if this is such a good idea, why don't you have just one model? We have a weak infrastructure in our school district. Now, we just passed a $148 million bond. We'll be renovating all of our schools. Over the course of the next 10 years, I believe we'll have air conditioning in all of our schools. And then we'll be asking our members of our public to consider moving in that direction. But again, we have some work to do with our infrastructure. The balanced calendar gets in the way of family traditions. Well, it can, but I'll tell you what, autumn in Michigan is an amazing time to be outside. The fall leaves are changing, all of that. I bet that's the case in Washington State as well. So it might be time to create some new traditions. Traditional school calendars are more equitable. Nope, I already told you. When we are off in the summer, often all of those resources are shut down to our students. Balanced school calendars are more challenging for blended families. Okay, so what I mean by this is I've been told by families who, for whatever reason, are no longer together. And our parents actually appreciate the balanced calendar because there's access times to their children more frequently. And so the traditional model may be that one parent is doing most of the parenting during the school year, and then in the summer, the other parent might get access to the students or take custody. So I know that that's not maybe the go-to model anymore, but I can tell you that this balanced calendar model has been promoted by divorced parents who believe that this is a better model. And the balanced calendar only benefits struggling students. I have research that says the balanced calendar benefits all students. So we can talk about that at another time. It's time for me to introduce our panel. Joining us tonight from actually the state of Washington. She now lives in Holt, Michigan, works for the Michigan Department of Education. She has one student on the balanced calendar, one that attended the balanced calendar and is currently on our hybrid traditional calendar. We have Kelly Fulminio. Also joining us tonight, Erica Johnson. Erica lives in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, works at Central Michigan University, about 80 miles north of where I sit today. Her district is new to the balanced calendar. She's a PTO president and has good perspective on the transition and how to support families and staff through the transition. Jennifer Roble, joining us from Holt, Michigan, is a current Board of Education member. So she is one of the trustees that oversees the district that I sit in. She had 2 children transition through the balanced school calendar, and both currently attend our hybrid traditional calendar schools. She also works for the Michigan Department of Education. Kevin Leonard lives in Holt, Michigan. He's also a current Board of Education trustee. He had a child transition through the balanced calendar who is also on the traditional hybrid calendar. He works for Michigan State University as a Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. So that's it on my end. Jessica, how would you like me to swing questions?
Thanks, David. We have a few, I think your colleagues have been scanning the questions in the chat. And
Wonderful.
so That might be one place to start. And then what I would ask participants to do, if you have a question and would like to verbalize the question, please raise your hand and I can unmute you. Otherwise, go ahead and either type into the chat or in the Q&A, and David and the team can sort of riff off of those. How's that sound?
I think that's a great plan.
Okay, and I'm going to remove your spotlight so everybody can see everything. All right, I have Rebecca has raised her hand. Do you want me to hand it over to you? Hand it over to her and have her ask? Or do you want to address a few of the things in the chat?
Yeah, why don't we go live?
Okay. All right, there you go, Rebecca. Welcome.
Hi, good evening. I appreciate you guys doing this Zoom meeting tonight. So I am a parent of a school district and also a spouse of employee. And the question I have is, what does it look like for like ancillary employees, like bus drivers, grounds crew, different things like that? Like, for example, with the bus drivers, if you do the classes during the break, do you use transportation for that? So does that mean that they're working more, or are they on break at the same time? What does that look like that you've experienced?
I will take this one. And panel, if you have some thoughts on this, feel free to jump in. But typically, we do use some transportation during a school break, but not all bus drivers per se are required, because it's the number of kids attending Intercession drops. Mm-hmm. Therefore, the bulk of the staff is off. That's also the case with some of our other support groups, such as custodians, maybe para-educators or para-pros, recess supervisors, safety team members, and what have you. So it's a good question.
Thank you.
One of the questions in the chat has to do with how do you find childcare when you don't have a block of time in the summer? What would it look like to try to find childcare on the intercession time spread out through the year? And I think any of the parents can jump in, or board members. So I'll let you answer that.
Kelly Flaminio, would you like to start on that?
Sure. So like Dr. Hornick said, I have one kid currently on a balance calendar, one that already went through, and my husband and I are both work full-time. So we've always taken advantage of Intercession. It's awesome. We pay by the week. We do before and after care we used to do before and after care throughout the year. So we had that, and then you could tack that on to Intercession. So Intercession ran like a normal school day. And then if you had before and after care, you would go into before and after care as well. But it was awesome. Like, Intercession was themed. There was a field trip. I know that our school offers scholarships for families that can't cover that weekly cost. So for me, the childcare wasn't an issue, because we'd either have 12 weeks of summer camp in the summer that we have to pay all at once, or we have more childcare costs spread out throughout the year instead of that kind of one lump sum.
Thank you, Kelly. Erica, do you have any thoughts on this?
Sure. Yeah, this was actually something I was very concerned about in opting into our balanced calendar program here, but it's ended up working out quite well. And again, similar to Kelly's discussion, that we do have childcare that's in, different weeks through the intercession process. And so we take advantage of those for the most part as well. Although I will say that my son decided he came home before his first intercession and said, I get next week off of school, I'm not going. So we had to kind of figure out, I said, well, he said, well, I actually do want to go on those field trips. So we had to find 3 days of care. We were fortunate that our family was able to step in. And so he was actually able to get more time with some of his grandparents during that week. But then the other intercessions that we've had are, we take full advantage of the intercession scheduled programming. He also attends after school care, and we've actually had the experience with our district that it's cheaper for us to participate in the intercessions than it is to find 12-week full-time childcare during the school year. Our intercession prices are fairly low, and they do get to go on quite a few field trips with that process. And so he enjoys that a little bit more. So now we're looking at one camp during this summertime to look for full-time care for him versus what would have been like a 12-week previously. And so it ends up saving us, I think, almost $1,000 over the course of the year in childcare costs to participate in the intercessions. And he loves it because he gets to go hang out with his friends at school and do more what he considers to be fun activities during those sessions. So it works out better than I ever anticipated, actually.
Thank you. Jennifer Roble, any thoughts on childcare?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to feed off of what Erica just said. It's the intercession, the educators, from teachers to paras to bus drivers who actually come in and do recess supervision sometimes too. They set it up in a way that the kids don't realize that they're learning, that they're actually doing educational activities. So both of my children fed off of that, and they actually wanted to keep going back because they were doing quote unquote art projects or fun activities, art, music, and they incorporate all of the fine arts into the intercession. And I think that's a real bonus because, again, they don't think that they're learning anything. They're just there to have fun and hang out with their friends.
Awesome. And then let's see if Kevin Leonard, do you have any thoughts on childcare or intercession?
No, I think I think Erica and Jennifer and others have summed it up pretty good. During the pandemic, things changed, but prior to that, I can attest that intercession was a fantastic opportunity for our son. Better than most, I'll be honest, the experience was better than some of the summer camps that we had put him in. Prior to that, coming enrolled there at the school where he was able to do a balanced calendar and participate. So it's been beneficial to us. And we kind of, here during the pandemic, we were at home and we didn't have him engaged. We missed it because he did a lot of sitting around. Where with your intercession, you're engaged with as I think Erica said, you're engaged with your friends, you see them, you get to play. The learning is hands-on learning. It's not sitting in a classroom having a teacher talk to you about what you're doing and then you work in a workbook. It's much different than that, and it's learning truthfully the way that I think more learning probably should be done, even in our classrooms at times. So it was hugely beneficial for our son.
Thank you, panel. Hey, there is a question about participation fees in intercession. And that's locally controlled. So across the nation, I've seen districts that charge a tuition for intercession. And as mentioned, both I think by some of the panelists, the reality is often intercession is priced lower than the local childcare so that it can be affordable. But there are districts across the nation that are also using Title I funds. And I would imagine that ESSER funds might be available because you are potentially closing some learning gaps and addressing unfinished learning that have potentially occurred through this pandemic. So that is really a flexible opportunity there. I'm just
can I add, David?
Yep.
Part of my job is I oversee Title I and Learning Assistant Program, the Learning Assistance Program in Washington State, and those combined drive out about $685 million to local entities in our state. So what we've seen during the pandemic is a real shift in how those funds are utilized. That has really taken us away from the traditional ways of using the funding, because that question did come up. What happens when ESSER funds expire, which they do last set of ESSER funds, I think by 2024. So that's part of the study grant, is to figure out what's out there to help fund. And a lot of districts have approached us to talk about what can we do with our title and our lap funds. And most things are pretty allowable, especially if the school is in a school wide. So we can talk more offline if folks are interested in that.
Thank you, John. Another question that just popped up is, the question, or excuse me, the calendar you just showed doesn't look like the one that our district is showing us. That is going to be very likely to be true. The model that Holt Public uses is different than what the other balanced calendar schools use in the state of Michigan. That will be different than neighboring districts potentially in different ESDs in Washington state. And so the reality is work closely with your school districts, but there's nothing preventing your district from saying, we really want to be off the full week of Thanksgiving. Great, take it off. As long as you sprinkle those 180 days accordingly across the rest of the year, do that. We have a harvest time in Michigan, although there's not, the agricultural industry has been greatly impacted by, the amazing development of combines and technology where, one farmer is doing the work of 40, tons of people. But you might have a harvest time in Washington state where you really need to be off. Okay, work that into your calendar, but you need to work with your local officials accordingly. So the next question, again, I'll quickly take, but I want to hear more from our panelists. What experience do you have with kids running potentially in programs in multiple districts? So what we have in Michigan is we have ISDs, intermediate school districts, and in our tech centers and our career center, usually our kids will be with us for half a day and then go to our tech center or career center for some specialized instruction. And we're on two different calendars, but we found a way to make that work. What we do is our kids generally go to school on both calendars for those portions of the day. It has really not been a big issue. Ideally, our entire county would be on the same calendar, and so that wouldn't be an issue. That's not the case currently here in Michigan. But if your ESDs are doing this work collaboratively, that might be something you consider. I'm not telling you you should do that. I just think that that's part of the conversation moving forward. I think I'm going to pose a question to you, Kelly. Kelly, as a parent who has lived the balanced calendar, what are some of those high points that you want to reinforce to our group tonight?
So I already touched on the intercession, and I know Erica and Jen and Kevin have kind of talked to that too, about it really does end up kind of saving costs because it tends to be a lot less expensive than your typical summer camp. The other highlights for me, so I live in Holt, but my kids were not zoned to go to Horizon. So we did in-district school of choice for the balanced calendar. A lot of what appealed to me was that, not having the 12 weeks of summer, the proficiency scores were a lot higher at that school. And then the other things I like is I do really like having the vacations on the off times. So we get those 2 weeks in October on our calendar, and that's when we usually travel. I mean, we do travel a little bit in the summer, but I plan the bigger trips for those breaks where not everybody else is traveling. I also have my oldest, who is now on the traditional calendar, is a special education student. He has an IEP, and the balanced calendar worked really well with him on providing more time. So there was less breaks, less time to be out of routine, and that worked really well for him. He's doing well now. We've had some struggles going to the traditional calendar, but I think it's really beneficial for those students that have any sort of struggles. Those are kind of my big
Awesome.
things.
Yeah, thank you. Erica, there's a question in the chat about the transition, and I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about your experience as a parent and PTO president regarding, the runway that your district took in transitioning and any helpful hints.
Sure. My district is a little bit different than Holt in that our balanced calendar is an opt-in option. So we run both the traditional calendar and the balanced calendar in different schools across our district. And so ours looked like several of the schools that were going to be running the program. So we have several elementary schools that go K2 and then a few that go 3 through 5. And then so those folks recruited like some of the principals from each, like we took one K2 and one 4-5 who are running balanced calendar programs. And then they recruited the parents, they held information nights and that kind of thing, recruited folks. And then we ended, we had a developmental kindergarten that wasn't yet balanced calendar. We ended that summer, started on the traditional timeline, but then went back to school early in the early August timeframe. And so we, it was, I think there were some road bumps, some bumps in the road in the first year. They were mostly helping parents understand the timelines and whatnot. So it took just a lot of communication from our district to help those families understand what was happening. But by year 2, it was pretty seamless, I think, for most folks. They knew what to expect at that point, and just making sure that your calendars are especially when running dual calendars, making sure that dates are marked. This is balanced calendar information and this is traditional calendar information. But that happened pretty quickly for folks.
Thank you, Erica. Jennifer, any thoughts that you have you would like to share regarding the balanced calendar or any experience that you and your family would like to highlight?
Yes, thanks, Dr. Hornak. Dr. Hornak touched on it in his presentation, but the breaks are truly deserved and truly needed because by that October break, we saw both of my children are on traditional, hybrid traditional right now, but by that October break, we saw that everybody was just out of gas, and from educators to support staff. And it actually gave them a boost after 2 weeks to come back and be refreshed and say, okay, let's do this again until the week off and thing in November, and then the 2 weeks in November or December. I think it takes some time for people to wrap their head around this concept, and that's okay. Like Kelly said, my husband and I built our house in Horizons zoned district for the balanced calendar before we even had children, because we knew the benefits behind it and we knew the payoff that it would give to our children. And both of our children went through developmental kindergarten through 4th grade in a balanced calendar. And now I have a 5th grader and a 10th grader, and they're asking why they don't get 2-week breaks.
We can work on that.
Right. So you can see the learning loss is not there for them. Granted, they come from a supportive household who actually works in education. So, but the learning loss for the kids that don't have that support at home is far less than a traditional student. Not saying that Holt isn't competent, but it's just the difference between my children's friends that aren't in the balanced calendar. You can see it. You can see the learning loss. So take your time, wrap your head around it, and just think about it.
Thank you. Kevin Leonard, any thoughts?
So I'll just tell you that when my wife was the first one to start looking at schools. First off, when we had our kid, it was just a shock to me. I don't know, not like I wasn't expecting or planning for it. It's just, I think it takes men a little bit longer to adapt to something. And she started looking at our schools and what options were available. And we participated in the K through, I think it's the same one that Jennifer just spoke about. And we had an option to do the traditional or the balanced. And I think somebody else on here said, what about your summers, like your August, right? Like that. I'm from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I live on the water, and that was my first gut reaction too, was, oh my God, I'm going to lose our August. That's the prime time to be on the boat, it's out fishing. But my wife shared with me some of the data. I did some of the research, and I started looking into this. In the the benefits that it provides your kids in education, that not having that full 3 months off it's just undisputable, and I was like, as someone who works in higher education and has a PhD, I'm like, I want my kid to be able to have every opportunity to have a leg up and have every chance that he can have as being as advanced as he can. And that balanced calendar is what provided it. And we did it because I'll be honest, I was really hoping that by the time he got into the 5th and 6th grade, Dr. Hornak would have gotten us into a balanced calendar all the way through the 12th grade. I mean, that was in the back of my head, because I had gotten used to it. And I'll tell you what, I really love those 2 weeks off in October, and I miss those, and Finn does too. Those used to be fantabulous time. Michigan, Northern Michigan and Michigan period in the fall is just beautiful time to be out there and exploring it. You do have to change your way you think about things, and you change, and you have new traditions, and you have new things that you do that you may not have thought of or did as a kid. But it's not bad, it's not worse, it's just different. And it was really nice having a week where we could have, maybe ourselves take a week off at Thanksgiving to travel and not have to feel like we're rushed to turn around and come back. We could go a few days, spend with family. And it got to the point where I didn't really miss August that much. And as you saw, we've worked in, I think, a couple 4-day weekends in there in August and September where we're still able to get up north, and we're still able to go out and boat and swim and enjoy ourselves. So to me, the hands down was just the research and the studies that show the learning that is lost when kids are, not in school versus when they are. It was just insurmountable for us to do anything differently than what we did. And, we got the report cards the other day for Finn, and I think he's already reading at almost a 7th grade, close to a 7th grade level. And, yes, we do read a lot, but I'll be honest, to me, that's the balanced calendar that helped get him there and keep him, doing that, because it's not his favorite subject. He loves math, he loves STEM, but he's doing really well and excelling in reading. And I'll give it all credit to that.
Thank you so much for that. Folks, we're nearing the end of our session. A couple of things that I noticed in the chat happen to be, can this model be through the whole entire district? Yes, it's most efficient when your district functions on one model. As I mentioned during the presentation, our district has a weak infrastructure. We will be remediating that over the next 8 to 10 years, but we don't have air conditioning in all of our buildings. And so our public has shared that they would prefer us not to expand this initiative until we have stable climate control inside of our buildings. But there are districts across the nation that have been functioning on the balanced calendar for years and years and years, and doing it quite well. To that end, I will hand it back over to John, I believe, as he wraps this up. It's been a pleasure to serve you this evening. I'd like to thank our panelists, Kelly, Erica, Jennifer, and Kevin, for finding time. In Michigan, we're nearing the 10 o'clock hour, so it's getting close to bedtime. I know the rest of you are probably getting close to dinner time or wrapping that up. So again, thanks for joining us this evening. John, over to you.
All right. Thank you, David. Thank you, panelists. Appreciate everybody joining in. So Jessica provided you a link to a webpage with the balanced calendar resources in the chat. Please access that. I know there were some unanswered questions. We'll try to glean those from the chat and get answers out there. Always, there just isn't enough time to get everything taken care of. It. I think Kevin said it well, and the other folks said it. It's a time for folks just to kind of go out and research the models. Go to that webpage. There are a lot of resources on that. The National Year-Round Association for Year-Round Schools. There's a lot of stuff there too. Just Google it. Google the balanced calendar. So appreciated the questions that surfaced today. And before we leave the Zoom, I just want to share the balanced calendar is not a state requirement. I know Kevin shared that. It's not a state requirement. It is an option for local entities to explore, to see if this is of interest to the entity and the community. That's the study part of the planning grant. And the process takes time. One thing we learned during the pandemic is we had to do a lot of stuff differently really quickly. At least for this, if things need to be done a little bit different, we'll have time to do it. So that's part of the study grant here. So again, thank you panelists for joining us. Like you said, you're 3 hours ahead of us in Washington State, way past my bedtime. I'm starting on too. So thank you. And a reminder for districts and local education agencies that are on the call today, you can apply for the Balanced Calendar Study Grant through the EDS system by accessing iGrants. It is form package 173 and is open through December. So thanks again. Hope everyone has a wonderful evening.